The church was silent. You could hear the sound of the fan spinning above, the faint crack of wood from the pews, and the voice of the pastor saying, "Let us rise for the Holy Communion." I stood up gently, smoothing the folds of my dress, trying to hide the nervousness in my heart. I wanted to walk forward with my son by my side. I wanted us to look like the family everyone thought we were. But just as I touched his arm and whispered, "Come, let's go together," he looked up at me with wide eyes, full of something I couldn't name. Then he said it. The words that tore through me like a sharp knife. "Don't take the communion. You're not family." I froze. My legs felt weak. The walls of the church seemed to close in on me. People were watching, though they tried to pretend they weren't. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the pastor's voice anymore. Not family? My own son, the boy I had carried, the child I had raised with every ounce of strength, was saying this in front of everyone. My chest tightened, and I wanted to scream, to ask him why, to remind him of the nights I stayed awake by his sickbed, the days I worked myself to exhaustion just to buy him shoes. But I couldn't speak. My throat locked up. My vision blurred with tears. He pulled his hand away from mine and stepped forward without me. He walked towards the altar with steady steps, leaving me standing there, abandoned, humiliated, crushed. And in that single moment, I wondered, what had I done so wrong that my own son would deny me here, in God's house? The question burned inside me, but the answer was not yet clear. And as the congregation lifted their voices in song, my world fell into pieces. That was the moment everything changed. But to understand how we reached this point, I must take you back to where it all began. When my son Daniel was born, he was the joy of my life. I had never seen anything more beautiful than his tiny fingers curling around mine. I still remember the smell of baby powder, the sleepless nights when I would hum old lullabies my own grandmother taught me. I was young then, not more than 19, and the world felt both heavy and hopeful. Daniel's father, Michael, was a complicated man. Sometimes gentle, sometimes harsh, always unpredictable. At first he was proud to be a father. He carried Daniel around the compound, showing him off to neighbors, grinning like a boy himself. But soon the weight of responsibility sank in, and Michael began to change. He drank more, worked less, and argued often. There were nights I cried silently on the thin mattress while Daniel slept between us, my tears soaking the pillow. But I stayed. I stayed because of my son. I told myself that even if love between Michael and me faded, Daniel would still have both parents under one roof. Yet life rarely listens to the promises we make in secret. When Daniel was 5, Michael left. No explanation, no goodbye. Just gone. One morning, I woke up to find his side of the bed cold and his clothes missing. I searched, I begged for answers, but all I got were rumors. Rumors of another woman. Rumors of debts he couldn't face. So it was just me and Daniel. I worked as a cleaner in the local school. I took extra shifts washing clothes for neighbors, scrubbing floors until my hands cracked. Also, Daniel would never lack food or books. People pitied me, some even whispered behind my back. But when Daniel smiled, when he wrapped his small arms around me and said, "You're the best, Mum," every hardship seemed worth it. For years, it was just us against the world. We struggled, yes, but we also laughed. I taught him how to read, how to pray before meals, how to respect elders. On Sundays, we never missed church. Daniel loved sitting in the front row, his voice ringing out during hymns, his eyes shining as he recited memory verses. I thought I was doing everything right. But life, once again, had other plans. The trouble began when Daniel turned 13. Teenagers change. Everyone warns you, but you never quite expect it. My sweet boy, who once clung to my skirt, began to pull away. He became quiet, secretive. He would stay longer at his friends' houses, come home late, and when I asked where he'd been, he would shrug and say, "Nowhere important." At first, I thought it was normal teenage behavior. But then I noticed something different, something sharp in his tone, something distant in his eyes. He stopped calling me Mum as often. Sometimes he would just say her, when talking about me to his friends. One night, I overheard him whispering on the phone. His voice was low, urgent. "She doesn't understand me. She's not really, you know. Not like family should be." The words stabbed at me, though he didn't know I was listening. I wanted to confront him, to ask what he meant, but fear kept me silent. And then came the Sunday that shattered everything. The day at church when Daniel said those words aloud for everyone to hear. But wait, before that Sunday, something happened that I must tell you. A woman appeared in our lives. Her name was Evelyn. She was tall, elegant, always dressed in bright clothes and jewelry that caught the sunlight. At first, she was just a face in the church congregation. Then little by little, she drew closer. She would smile at Daniel, slip him sweets, pat his head. I thought it was kindness. Until the day Daniel came home smelling of perfume that wasn't mine, his pockets stuffed with money. "Where did you get this?" I asked. He looked at me boldly, his chin lifted. "From Evelyn. She said I'm like a son to her." My blood ran cold. A storm was coming, and I could feel it. The Sunday of the communion arrived like any other. I wore my best dress, though it was faded from years of washing. Daniel looked sharp in his white shirt, ironed crisp, a gift from one of the church elders. I wanted us to stand proud together. But as we walked into the church, I noticed Evelyn in the front row. She waved at Daniel, and he waved back with a smile that wasn't meant for me. My heart sank. Still, I told myself today is sacred, nothing bad can happen here. I was wrong. When the pastor called us forward for communion, I reached for Daniel's hand, hoping to remind him that we were one, that no outsider could break us. But he looked at me, and with eyes colder than winter he said, "Don't take the communion. You're not family." The ground beneath me seemed to disappear. And as the bread and wine passed from hand to hand, my son stepped forward without me. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him back and demand he remember who I was. But instead, I stood frozen, my tears falling silently, while everyone else pretended not to see. And just when I thought the humiliation was complete, Evelyn turned her head slightly, caught my eye, and smiled. That smile was not kind. It was a smile that said, "He's mine now." My world tilted, and I realized this was only the beginning of the storm. The communion ended, but I could not move. My legs felt heavy, as though they were nailed to the floor. My eyes stayed fixed on Daniel as he walked back to his seat with Evelyn's gaze following him like a shadow. When he sat down beside her instead of me, the air inside my chest seemed to vanish. I forced myself to finish the service. I sang when others sang. I bowed my head when the pastor prayed, but my heart was not in any of it. I was waiting for the final amen, for the moment I could take Daniel aside and ask him why he had done this to me. But when the benediction was given and people began to file out, Daniel did not come to me. He went straight to Evelyn. She bent down and whispered something in his ear, and he laughed. He laughed, after stabbing my heart with those words. Neighbors glanced at me, pity in their eyes, but no one spoke. In church, gossip hides behind polite silence. I walked towards him, trying to steady my voice. "Daniel, let's go home." He didn't move. Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder, her bracelets jingling softly. "Oh, let him come with me for lunch. I made jollof rice his favorite. Don't worry, I'll drop him off later." Her voice was sweet, but there was steel underneath. I shook my head firmly. "No. He's coming with me." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Why? You don't own me." Those words cut deep, but I swallowed the pain. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away and crossed his arms. "I want to go with her," he said flatly. The people still lingering at the church gate turned their faces away, pretending to be interested in the dust rising from the road. But I felt their ears straining, their curiosity burning. I stood there, torn between dragging him away and letting him go. If I forced him, would I lose him even more? If I allowed him, would Evelyn's grip tighten forever? Finally I whispered, "Fine. But be home before evening." Daniel's face lit up with victory, and he walked off beside her, never looking back. And I stood alone at the churchyard, watching the two of them disappear into the distance. The house was empty without him. I cooked yam porridge, but the food tasted like ashes in my mouth. I waited, staring at the door every few minutes, hoping he would come home early, maybe even apologize. But night fell, and still he did not return. By 9 p.m. I could no longer sit still. I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders and went to Evelyn's house. It was not far. Just 2 streets away, in a large compound with bright flowers and a shiny metal gate. The house itself looked nothing like mine. My walls were faded, patched with old cement. Hers gleamed with fresh paint. I knocked softly. No one answered. I knocked again, harder this time. Finally, the door opened. And there was Evelyn, her hair neatly tied. Her lips painted a deep red. "Oh, it's you," she said coolly. "What brings you here so late?" My voice trembled, but I tried to stand tall. "Where is my son?" She smiled as though amused. "Your son? He's asleep. He had a big meal, and was too tired to walk home. Don't worry, I gave him a proper bed. Better than what he has, I imagine." Anger rose in me, hot and choking. "You have no right to keep him here." Evelyn leaned against the doorframe, unfazed. "He chose to stay. I didn't force him. Maybe you should ask yourself why he prefers it here." Her words stung more than a slap. "Send him home," I demanded. But she only shook her head. "It's late. He's already asleep. You wouldn't want to wake him, would you? Come back tomorrow." And with that, she shut the door in my face. I walked home in the dark, my chest heavy with dread. The next morning, Daniel strolled into the house as if nothing had happened. His shirt smelled of new detergent, not the one I used. His shoes were polished, his hair neatly combed. "Where were you?" I asked quietly. "At Evelyn's," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "She said I can come over anytime." I tried to hold back my tears. "Daniel, I am your mother. Don't forget that." Finally, he looked at me, his gaze hard. "Maybe being a mother isn't about blood. Maybe it's about who treats me like family." Those words nearly broke me. I wanted to grab him, to shake him, to remind him of every sacrifice I had made. But I didn't. Instead, I went into my room, closed the door, and wept until my pillow was soaked. Days turned into weeks. Daniel began spending more time with Evelyn. She bought him new clothes, gave him pocket money, even a shiny phone. He flaunted it proudly, scrolling through pictures while I stared at the empty shelves in our kitchen, wondering how I would afford our next meal. Sometimes he would return home late, his eyes tired but his spirit stubborn. When I scolded him, he would snap back. "You're just jealous of her. She gives me what you can't." I felt powerless, trapped in a nightmare where another woman was slowly stealing my child. But still I prayed. Every night, I knelt on the cold floor and begged God not to let Daniel's heart turn fully against me. One Sunday, after weeks of pain, I decided to fight back in my own way. During testimony time at church, I stood up. My knees shook, but my voice carried through the hall. I want to thank God for the gift of motherhood, for the strength He gives us to raise our children, even when the journey is hard. I believe no matter what, a mother's love cannot be replaced. The congregation clapped softly, but I could feel Daniel's glare burning into me from across the aisle where he sat with Evelyn. When I returned to my seat, I whispered under my breath, "Lord, fight for me." But little did I know, the fight was only beginning. That evening after church, something happened that pushed everything to a breaking point. Daniel did not come home again. I waited until midnight, my fear twisting into anger. I marched once more to Evelyn's house, determined not to leave without him. This time I didn't knock softly. I banged the gate until it rattled. Lights flickered on, and after a few minutes, Evelyn opened the door, her expression annoyed. "What is it now?" she snapped. "Where is my son?" I demanded. She smirked. "He doesn't want to come with you. In fact, he told me he doesn't consider your place his home anymore." My breath caught. "You're lying." At that moment, Daniel appeared behind her, his eyes sleepy but defiant. "She's not lying," he said. "I don't want to go back with you. I'm staying here." The world spun. My knees nearly gave out. "Daniel," I whispered, "don't do this to me." But he turned his face away. And Evelyn, victorious, placed a hand on his shoulder, her smile widening. That was the night my son chose another woman over me. The night Daniel declared he would no longer come home. I felt the ground beneath my feet give way. My heart cracked in two, but no one came to hold the pieces together. Evelyn stood there, proud and confident, her hand resting on my son's shoulder as though she had birthed him herself. "Daniel," I whispered, trying one last time, "please, think of everything we've been through. Think of the nights I stayed awake when you had fever, the times I skipped meals so you could eat, the clothes I patched with my own hands so you wouldn't be cold. I am your mother. But he refused to look at me. He stared at the floor, jaw clenched. You don't understand me. Evelyn does. I belong here. The words crushed me. Evelyn smiled, her voice dripping with false sweetness. You see, he has made his choice. You should respect that. Respect that? Respect the theft of my child? Respect the years of my sacrifice being erased in one sweep? But my lips trembled too much to form a reply. I turned away, my vision blurred with tears, and stumbled into the night. The road was empty, the crickets singing their cruel song. My body shook as I walked home alone, the cold air slicing my skin like knives. Inside my house, silence wrapped itself around me. The walls felt strange, as though they had forgotten I existed. His bed was empty, his toys untouched, his books stacked neatly on the table. I touched the pillow where his head once rested, and for the first time in years, I felt truly abandoned. The next morning, news had already spread. In small towns, nothing remains hidden for long. Women at the market whispered as I walked by. Children pointed. A man muttered, "Her own son doesn't want her." What shame! Their words followed me like shadows. I tried to hold my head high, but inside I was crumbling. I wanted to scream, "You don't know the whole story. You don't know what I gave up for him." But what use would it be? Their minds were already poisoned. By afternoon, a neighbor, Mrs. Lawson, came to my house. She was a kind woman, with soft eyes and a heart too big for her frail body. She sat beside me and held my hands. "I heard what happened," she said gently. "Don't lose hope. Children stray, but sometimes they find their way back." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to cling to her words like a lifeline. But how could I, when every day Daniel sank deeper into Evelyn's grip? Days passed, then weeks. Daniel rarely came home. When he did, it was only to collect his school uniform or books. He never stayed long, never shared a meal. He avoided my eyes, answering my questions with short, cold words. One evening he walked in wearing new sneakers, bright white with shiny red stripes. They were expensive. I knew because I had seen them displayed in the town's only boutique. "Where did you get those?" I asked, my voice tight. "Evelyn bought them," he said simply. "Daniel," I said, trying to steady my breathing. "You cannot let someone buy your love. Things are not more important than family." He rolled his eyes. "Maybe if you could afford things like this, I wouldn't need her." My chest burned. "Do you think love is measured by shoes? Do you think a mother's love can be replaced by money?" But he had already turned away, scrolling on his phone. The phone Evelyn had given him. I went to bed that night with tears soaking my pillow. One Sunday, I decided to confront Evelyn directly. After service, while others mingled outside, I walked up to her where she stood surrounded by a few church women. "Evelyn," I said firmly, "we need to talk." She turned, her smile polite but her eyes sharp. "About what?" "About Daniel," I replied. "He is my son. You are confusing him, turning him against me. Stop this." Gasps rippled through the women standing nearby. Evelyn placed a hand dramatically on her chest. "Me? Turning him against you? I am only helping him. Everyone knows you struggle to provide. Should I abandon a child who needs love just because his mother is too proud?" The women murmured. Some nodded, others frowned. Rage boiled inside me. "Love? You call it love when you steal him from his mother? That is not love, it is poison." Her smile never faltered. "Or maybe it is your bitterness speaking. Maybe Daniel simply prefers to be with me. Children know where they belong." The women looked between us, unsure what to believe. But in their silence I heard my defeat. Evelyn had already spun her web. I left the churchyard that day with humiliation burning in my chest. But God has a way of turning tides when we least expect it. One evening, Daniel came home unexpectedly. He looked pale, his eyes dull, his steps slow. He dropped his school bag on the floor and sank onto the chair without a word. "Daniel, what's wrong?" I asked, rushing to him. He shook his head. "Nothing. I'm just tired." But I knew it was more than that. His forehead was warm, his hands clammy. I fetched water and pressed a cloth to his skin, the way I used to when he was little. For the first time in months he didn't pull away. He let me care for him, his eyes fluttering shut as I hummed softly, the old lullaby he once loved. That night as he drifted to sleep I whispered, "No matter what happens, Daniel, you are my son. And I will never stop loving you." For a brief second, I saw a flicker of emotion in his eyes. Regret, maybe. Or sorrow. But then he turned his face away, and the wall between us rose again. The illness didn't last long. Within days, he was back at Evelyn's side, laughing and smiling as though nothing had happened. But that brief moment of vulnerability gave me hope. Somewhere deep inside him, the boy I raised was still there. I held on to that hope like a candle in the darkness. But then came the day that shattered it once more. It was a Wednesday afternoon when a knock came at my door. I opened it to find a policeman standing there. His uniform was crisp, his face stern. "Are you Daniel's mother?" he asked. My stomach dropped. "Yes." "Why? What happened?" He hesitated, then said, "Your son was caught fighting at school. He and some other boys caused serious damage. The principal wants to see you immediately." My knees went weak. "Fighting? Daniel?" "Yes. They say he was defending another woman who claims to be his guardian. A woman named Evelyn." The world spun around me. My son fighting at school, defending Evelyn over me? I grabbed my shawl and rushed to the school with the officer. And when I entered the principal's office, what I saw froze me in place. Daniel standing there, bruised and defiant, Evelyn by his side, holding his hand as though she were his mother. And in that moment I realized, Evelyn wasn't just trying to win Daniel's heart. She was trying to erase me completely. The air inside the principal's office was heavy with tension. The faint ticking of the wall clock seemed louder than usual, each second cutting into me like a knife. I stood by the door, breathless, staring at my son. Daniel's lip was split, and there was a bruise forming under his eye. His shirt was untucked, the once white fabric now stained with dirt from the fight. He looked like a stranger. Not my little boy who once recited memory verses proudly in front of the congregation, but a hardened shadow I could barely recognize. Beside him sat Evelyn, her arm draped protectively around his shoulders. Her nails, painted crimson, glistened under the office light as though mocking me. She whispered something in his ear, and he gave a small nod, refusing to meet my eyes. Across the desk, the principal adjusted his glasses, his expression grave. He was a tall man with thinning hair, his suit crisp and his voice deep. "Thank you for coming," he said, looking at me briefly before turning to Evelyn. "We have a serious matter to discuss." Evelyn cleared her throat delicately. "Of course, Principal. I'm here to handle everything for Daniel. You can speak freely in front of me." I stepped forward, my voice trembling but firm. "Excuse me, Principal, but I am his mother. You will speak to me." Evelyn's smile was sharp. "Mother? If you were truly his mother, would he be in this condition? Would he be running wild in fights at school? Clearly, someone else needs to step up." My cheeks burned, but I forced myself not to cry. I turned to the principal. "Sir, please. Whatever has happened, I need to hear it. Tell me what Daniel has done." The principal leaned back, folding his hands together. "There was a serious altercation today. Daniel and 3 other boys confronted a classmate. Chairs were overturned, a window was broken. One boy ended up in the hospital with a deep cut. According to several witnesses, Daniel initiated the fight after this classmate made a comment about," he paused, glancing at Evelyn, "about his living arrangements." My stomach twisted. What kind of comment? The principal sighed. The boy mocked him for having 2 mothers. Said he didn't know which one to obey. Daniel reacted violently. The word stabbed me. 2 mothers. That was what people were calling it now. My shame, my humiliation, my fear, all twisted into one ugly truth that Evelyn was proudly parading around. I turned to Daniel. "Is this true? Did you do this?" He crossed his arms, his face defiant. He insulted Evelyn. I had to defend her. "And what about me?" My voice cracked. "Would you defend me the same way?" For the first time his eyes met mine. Cold. Empty. "You don't need defending." The silence in the room was deafening. The principal cleared his throat. "Regardless of the reason, violence is unacceptable. Daniel will be suspended for 2 weeks. If this behavior continues, we may have to consider expulsion. Evelyn gasped dramatically. Expulsion? No, you can't do that to him. He's just a boy defending what's right. The principal shook his head. Rules are rules. My decision is final. I nodded slowly, trying to gather the shattered pieces of my dignity. Thank you, Principal. I will handle this matter at home. But Evelyn interrupted, her voice sharp. No, I will handle it. Daniel will be staying with me during his suspension. I'll make sure he reflects on his actions. No, the word tore from my throat before I could stop it. He is my son. He will come home with me. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, looking between us. I'd rather stay with Evelyn. It was like being stabbed in the chest again. I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. Daniel, you may think she understands you, but I am your mother. You belong with me. Evelyn's laugh was low and cruel. Belong? Children are not possessions. Maybe you should realize that love is earned, not forced. The principal, clearly uncomfortable with the growing hostility, stood up. This discussion has gone far enough. I don't care where Daniel stays during his suspension, but he must not set foot in this school until the 2 weeks are over. Settle your family matters outside these walls. And with that, he dismissed us. Outside the office, the corridor buzzed with students whispering and staring. News of the fight had spread like wildfire. I could feel their eyes burning holes into my back as I walked out with Daniel and Evelyn. Once we were outside the school gates, I turned sharply to my son. You are coming home with me. No arguments. But Daniel stepped closer to Evelyn, his shoulders stiff. I said I'm staying with her. My voice cracked. Why, Daniel? What has she given you that I haven't? His reply was like ice. She believes in me. You only try to control me. My knees weakened, but I refused to collapse in front of them. I straightened my spine and whispered, you will regret this path one day. And when you do, I'll still be here. Because a mother never stops waiting. Daniel looked away, but I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. A tiny flicker, buried deep beneath the pride and stubbornness. Evelyn, however, tightened her grip on his arm. Come, Daniel. Let's go home. And just like that, they walked away together, leaving me standing in the dust, my tears falling silently. The following days were the longest of my life. The house was silent, every corner echoing with his absence. I kept expecting to hear his footsteps, his laughter, his voice calling, Mom! But all I heard was silence. I tried to visit him at Evelyn's house, but she never let me pass the gate. Sometimes I caught glimpses of him through the window, smiling, eating, laughing. Always with her. And each time my heart shattered a little more. But I was not the only one watching. The town was watching too. Neighbors whispered louder now, their voices cutting like knives. Imagine, her son choosing another woman. She must have been a terrible mother. No wonder he left. Their gossip spread like poison, tainting every corner of my life. But I refused to give up. One evening I went to church alone. The pew felt cold without Daniel beside me. The hymns sounded hollow. But when the pastor preached, his words struck me deeply. Sometimes God allows us to be broken so he can rebuild us stronger. Do not lose faith in the storm. Remember, he is the anchor that holds. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, Lord, I cannot fight this alone. Fight for me. Bring my son back. In that moment, I felt a strange peace wash over me. A whisper in my heart. Do not stop. Keep standing. The truth will come to light. I clung to that whisper like a lifeline. But just as hope flickered inside me, a storm bigger than all the rest began to brew. One evening, as I was returning from the market, a neighbor rushed to me breathless. Have you heard? She cried. There was an accident near the highway. A car overturned. They say Evelyn and Daniel were inside. The world tilted under my feet. My basket of vegetables fell to the ground, rolling into the dust. What? I gasped. Where? Tell me where. At St. Mary's Hospital, she said quickly. Hurry. Without another word, I dropped everything and ran, my heart pounding louder than my footsteps. Each second felt like a lifetime, each breath like fire in my chest. And as I reached the hospital gates, dread coiled inside me like a serpent. Because I knew whatever awaited me inside those walls would change everything. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. My heart thundered as I rushed through the wide corridors, my shawl slipping from my shoulders. Nurses moved quickly, their voices hushed but urgent. I grabbed the first one I saw. "Please, my son Daniel. He was in an accident." "Where is he?" The nurse looked at me, then pointed down the hall. "Emergency ward. Room 3. Hurry." I ran, my legs shaking. When I reached the door, I pushed it open without knocking. And there he was. Daniel lay on the bed, his face pale, his head wrapped in bandages. His chest rose and fell faintly, but he was alive. I let out a sob of relief. Evelyn was not in the room. I rushed to his side, taking his limp hand in mine. "Daniel, my boy. I'm here. Mum is here." His eyelids fluttered. Slowly, he opened them, and for the first time in months, his gaze softened when it met mine. His lips trembled. "Mum." Tears blurred my vision. I pressed his hand to my cheek. "Yes, my son. I never left you. I never will." A weak tear rolled down his face. I'm sorry. I was wrong." The words pierced me, but this time not with pain, with healing. My heart cracked open, and years of hurt poured out. Don't speak. Just rest. We will talk later. I forgive you already." He tried to smile, but his face winced from the effort. I thought she cared. But when the car crashed, she ran. She didn't even check if I was alive. It was the strangers who pulled me out, not her. My body stiffened. Evelyn had abandoned him? Left him for dead? My blood boiled, but I pushed the anger aside. This moment was not about her. It was about us. I stroked his hair gently. "Now you know, my son. People can give you gifts, money, sweet words. But family never leaves. A mother never leaves." His tears fell freely now, mingling with mine. "Mum, will you still have me? After everything I said? After I told you, you're not family?" I bent down, kissing his forehead softly. "Daniel, you will always be my family. Nothing you say or do can change that. Blood, love, sacrifice. Those are things no one can replace. You are mine and I am yours. Always." He clutched my hand tightly, as though afraid I might disappear. "I don't deserve you." I smiled through the tears. No child deserves a mother's love. It is given freely. It is not earned, it is not bought. It just is. Days passed and Daniel slowly healed. I stayed by his side every minute, feeding him, cleaning his wounds, praying over him. Neighbors who once gossiped now came to see with their own eyes the truth, that a mother's love cannot be stolen. Evelyn never visited. Not once. Her absence shouted louder than her presence ever did. And soon, people stopped whispering against me. Instead, they shook their heads and said, "We were wrong. She never stopped being his mother." When Daniel was finally discharged, he came home with me. Our house, though small, felt alive again. He walked slowly into his old room, touched his books, his bed, his pillow. Then he turned to me, his eyes wet. "Mum, I want to start over. With you. If you'll let me." I embraced him tightly, my tears soaking his shoulder. "We will start over, Daniel. Together." Months later, Daniel stood with me in church once more. The pastor raised the bread and wine, calling for communion. My heart pounded, memories of that painful day flooding back. But this time something different happened. Daniel turned to me, his hand reaching for mine. He held it firmly, his eyes shining with sincerity. "Mum," he whispered, his voice breaking, "you are my family." My knees weakened, but this time it was from joy, not sorrow. We walked together to the altar, side by side, as mother and son. And when we knelt and received the bread and wine, tears streamed down my face. Not of pain, but of thanksgiving. Life lesson. In life, people will try to take what is yours. They will use sweet words, gifts, and lies to lure hearts away. But what is true can never be stolen. A mother's love, patient and unshakable, will always outlast deception. Family is not about wealth or appearance. It is about sacrifice, forgiveness, and love that endures storms. Daniel learned it. I lived it. And I pray you, dear listener, remember it. Never let the world tell you who your family is. True family is the one that never leaves you, even when you fall. And so, though my son once said, "You're not family," today he knows the truth. I am his mother, and I always will be.